We went to great lengths to try to avoid it this year, but it's still happening. I mean, I even changed my hairstyle. All right, so, see, are my slides up? Okay, where's the forward? All right, so I'm going to talk to you about, the title is Driving Fast and Riding Slow, the Real Risks of Not Riding Your Bike. In a minute you'll see that this is a tip of the hat to a book that I'll talk about. So the question of the hour is, why don't more people ride their bikes? We all here know it's a good thing to do for all kinds of reasons. So the answer is because they have cars. Okay, well, cue laugh track didn't go over so well. Anyway, but seriously, we have a 1.5% mode share or something like that, and yet, you know, we don't have the rationale behind it. So let me skip a slide. The real issue is it's the perceived safety. Now, you know, this is something that comes up in a lot of different ways. It's something that you'll hear expressed in different ways. It is about the cars in a sense because people are afraid of cars. They're afraid of what cars will do to them. So in a way, it is about the car, if not just the fact that people have them to use. But when you think about it, so if you think that cycling, people don't ride their bikes because it's not safe, is that really true? Let's look at some numbers. These are fatality rates per 1 million hours of exposure. Small planes shouldn't be a surprise, 15.6 million. Motorcycling, everybody knows that's crazy. Swimming, 1.07. Walking near traffic, 0.8. Life in general, 1.53. Bicycling, 0.41. And I have to tell you that this is the high end of the range that was listed on this website that I referred to, which is bicyclinglife.com. The actual range they gave was 0.26 to 0.41. Okay, what's missing from this slide? Driving? Driving. All right, I'm glad you asked. So, click. There we go. So let's look at this across different countries. Look at driving, the risk of driving versus cycling. In France, cycling is safer by that same measure. In these countries, Germany, Sweden, Switzerland, the Netherlands, it's about equal. In Australia, it's a little more dangerous, not a lot. In the United States, cycling is safer than driving on a per million hours of exposure basis by a factor of 2. Let that sink in for a second. Even in Britain, where cycling is considered to be more dangerous than driving, the same statistics behind these numbers suggest that you would have to ride your bike for 15,000 years to have a 50% chance of dying in a bike crash. 15,000 years. Another number that I've heard is that, that people in America have a 15 times greater likelihood of dying in a car crash than in a bike crash. These are interesting numbers. And yet, you look at all the talk that we have around safety, and safety is important, I'm not dismissing it, but okay, so what's going on with these numbers? Well, we also know that safety in numbers kicks in when we get more people on bikes, right? We've heard that a couple times already in some of these presentations. This is actually something that was not discovered just with bicycles, believe it or not. It used to be called Sneads Law, and it really refers to the effect that was demonstrated as more and more cars got on the road. Traffic fatalities per driver per million hours went down, though they're still extremely high. But by any objective measure, you can make the argument that cycling is safe. Now, I want 0 fatalities. I'm not here to say the battle is won. I'm going to address this from a different angle, and you'll see where I'm getting at. So what the heck is going on here? If we have these objective measures that suggest that cycling is safe, what's the disconnect in our perception? Why is it that when the British Medical Society comes out with a study that says that the inherent benefits of riding a bike outweigh the risks by 77 to 1, nonetheless, the biggest obstacle in most people's minds to riding their bike is safety. Something is going on here. So let's talk about it. Meet these two gentlemen who are very distinguished in their fields. Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winning behavioral economist. Nicholas Taleb, author of a book called The Black Swan, you may have heard of. Let's talk first about Kahneman. Kahneman is sort of the father of behavioral economics. We're going to get a little wonky here. He won a Nobel Prize, so he's got something going on. He posits that we have two basic systems that we operate in our daily lives. We operate system one, which is our gut feel. He calls those heuristics. Those are shortcuts that your brain uses. System two is your analytical system. That's when you sit down and actually carefully consider things. Now, I had read Kahneman, but I hadn't read Taleb. When I read Taleb, who, by the way, is a road biker, and by the way, is also, he comes at this from the financial side. He's a trader. He trades against hedge funds and wins. He cleans their clock. He's become filthy rich by understanding probability and risk better than anybody else in the business. So if he ever offers to play poker, don't take him up on it. The book Fooled by Randomness referred to Kahneman, and that's how I made this connection. So, you know, if all this is true, and these people have pointed out that, you know, cycling is safe, and yet we draw the conclusion that it's not, obviously other people, not us rational cyclists and, you know, all of us advocates who know the score, right? Other people are stupid, or they'd be riding their bikes, wouldn't they? Yeah. I mean, why not? Well, not so fast. Another good book to read, Predictably Irrational by Daniel Ariely, says that we're all irrational. We all suffer from these biases. And in fact, they have names. Now, if you don't believe me that we're all equally subject to these biases, real quick brain teaser here. Ever heard of the Monty Hall problem? Monty Hall, let's make a deal? Yeah. Okay, run through this quickly. Monty Hall has you on the show. There are 3 doors. Behind one of the doors is a shiny new bicycle. Behind the other 2 doors are goats. You pick a door. You pick door number 1. Monty says, that's a good choice, but I'm going to give you a chance to change your mind. But before I give you that choice, I'm going to open a door, and I'm going to show you what's behind door number 3. Door number 3 is a goat. Now he gives you the choice. Do you stick with your choice, or do you switch?
No.
Stick. Show of hands. How many stick? Okay, I'd say that's at least half. This is a smart crowd. That's probably good. Well, guess what? The answer is that in that particular case, there is a 2/3 better chance of winning if you switch. And this was the subject of a huge debate even before we had online flame wars. This was a debate in the New York Times, and thousands of PhDs got it wrong. It's been rigorously proven that if you switch, you have a 2/3 better chance of winning. So even in this relatively simple example, we just completely miss, at least a lot of us, completely miss the true fact about what's going on. So, okay, here's some of the factors identified by Kahneman and Taleb that might be at work. Now we get really wonky. All right, availability heuristic is just the name they give to the fact that when you remember something better, for any reason, you overestimate its probability. If you simply repeat the number 9 to yourself 500 times and then somebody asks you to guess what card comes up, you're going to guess number 9 will come up more likely than the others. The affect heuristic is related. It says that you are going to better remember that which is most vividly presented to you, whether for good or bad. If it's vivid, you remember it. The availability cascade, and I'm going to go to the next slide here. The availability cascade is when you repeat those effects among people and they, you know, oh, I heard about something happening. Yeah, I heard about that too. Pretty soon, you're remembering it better and everybody's assuming that the probability is higher. Now, I maintain that you can derive a law from this, and this is going to be, just stick with me here. Okay, this is Bowden's law of perceived cycling risk. It's the availability heuristic plus the affect heuristic plus the availability cascade is proportional to the risk of cycling to an exponential degree. So, you know, it makes a lot of sense, right? Well, guess what? This is another cognitive bias. I put that in there to convince you that I'm right, but in fact, it demonstrates the cognitive bias. It's called the nonsense math effect. If you put a formula in a presentation, it's been shown that people will tend to believe you more than if you don't. So thank you, I hope that works. Okay, so what's behind all this? So why do we behave this way? Why are we so irrational? Well, some people say it's evolution. There's actually a whole field of evolutionary psychology that says that this is all because of, you know, our evolutionary history. So in a gross oversimplification, let's say that before we were the apex predators, same thing, right? Before we were apex predators, just staying alive, the hyper-vigilant, maybe overreactive, extremely risk-averse evolutionary ancestors tended to survive with a greater frequency than their counterparts. Maybe because that vivid sense, reminiscence of seeing their loved ones torn apart by hyenas did something to their brains. Well, if they tended to survive a little bit longer and perpetuate their gene pool more readily than the evolutionary precursor of the bike commuter, who was much more rational, contemplative, maybe a little slower on their feet, and as a result got thinned out, maybe that's just some sort of indication of how we got to this point with these cognitive biases that seem to affect us. And you know, this problem seems to have persisted well into the 20th century, even in sub-Saharan Africa and on the subcontinent of Asia, at least until the introduction of the Raleigh DL1, which prompted an evolutionary response of its own. So, okay, so maybe we are wired by evolution to overestimate certain risks, the dramatic risks, the horrific risks, the things like that come to mind that you just would not want to see happen to anybody. Well, maybe so. For instance, when we focus on scenes like this, that's a gut-wrenching scene, or even worse, like this. All right, now the next one, if you're squeamish, avert your eyes. But what about this? The invisible bike crash. I had to do that. I had to do that to wipe your brains clean of the prior two slides. I didn't want to leave you with the wrong impression. So, okay. So what do we do as advocates? Granted, we're all irrational. Granted, we don't evaluate risk very well. So what do? Do we keep on talking about safety in the same way that we have? Do we keep on hammering on the same statistics about the benefits of bike riding and the environmental effects and all this? Do we keep saying the same thing that we've been saying that has gotten us to the point where in 100 years bicycling has gone from a predominant form of transportation to something on the order of 1%? I don't know. I don't think that's a good idea. I think we need to change something. And I'm not here to tell you how to change the message. There are people who are going to talk in a few minutes that will give you some ideas. I think that there is something to be learned here. There's deeper things going on than just brute force logic and statistics. By all objective measures, I would maintain that cycling is a perfectly safe and rational thing to do, and yet, again, the largest impediment seems to be people think it's not safe. So obviously we're not doing something right, and we can change it. How we do that, that's up to us in the future. But I hope that I've at least given you some food for thought. And if I could leave you with something, I would leave you with maybe one line from that famous author, filmmaker, bike rack designer, sometimes rock star, David Byrne, who famously said, "Stop making sense." We're not rational. That's not the answer. And hopefully some of these presentations that are coming up next will give you some suggestions on how to implement that. Thank you very much.